Millionaire orders a Mustang horse's death for revenge, but a twist changes everything. Beneath the glaring sun of a sprawling desert estate, a beautiful Mustang galloped gracefully, its mane flowing like waves of molten gold. It was a creature of untamed beauty, a symbol of freedom that could not be tamed until it became the target of a sinister plan. A millionaire, consumed by vengeance, ordered its death, believing the Mustang was the reason his life was in ruins. A group of men with cold eyes and ruthless intent closed in on the unsuspecting horse, ready to carry out the unthinkable. But just as the trap was about to spring, fate intervened in a way no one could have imagined. What happened next would forever alter the course of the Mustang's life and expose a truth that would shock everyone. Stay with us for a powerful story of survival, redemption, and the unbreakable bond between strength and compassion. The air was heavy with the stillness of dusk, the kind that settles right before the night reveals its secrets. In the heart of a secluded desert ranch, surrounded by rugged cliffs and endless stretches of sand, a Mustang stood alone in a fenced enclosure. Its sleek chestnut coat shimmered in the fading sunlight, and its deep, intelligent eyes held a spark of wild defiance. This was no ordinary horse. It was a survivor of the unforgiving wild, a creature that had fought for every breath against predators, storms, and human greed. Nearby, the sprawling mansion of Charles Whitmore loomed like a fortress. The millionaire, known for his ruthlessness in business and life, watched the Mustang with an icy gaze. For Charles, this wasn't just any horse. It was a symbol of his fury. The Mustang had wandered onto his estate one fateful night, destroying his prized garden and inadvertently setting off a chain of events that he believed cost him dearly. It didn't matter that the damage was minimal. For Charles, the horse represented chaos, and he was determined to regain control at any cost. Charles had made his decision. Standing on the balcony, his sharp suit catching the last rays of sunlight, he motioned for his hired men to approach. "I want it gone," he said coldly, his voice slicing through the silence. "By tomorrow it shouldn't exist." The men exchanged uneasy glances, but knew better than to question him. In their line of work, loyalty to their employer was the only currency that mattered. They nodded silently and moved toward the enclosure, their boots crunching against the gravel path. The Mustang, sensing the shift in the air, raised its head. Its ears flicked toward the approaching footsteps, nostrils flaring as it caught the scent of danger. Despite the confines of the fence, the horse's wild instincts kicked in. It pawed the ground, muscles rippling with tension, ready to defend itself if needed. As the men surrounded the enclosure, one of them, a burly man named Jake, pulled out a coiled rope. He muttered under his breath, "It's just a horse, let's get this over with." Another man, leaner but with a cruel smile, added, "Don't waste time, we have our orders." The Mustang's eyes darted from side to side, searching for an escape. The once peaceful evening now crackled with tension, the kind that precedes a storm. As Jake stepped closer, the Mustang let out a powerful whinny, a sound that echoed across the ranch. Inside the mansion, Charles turned away from the window, satisfied that his orders were being carried out. But what he didn't know was that this decision, made in cold calculation, would set off a chain of events that neither he nor the Mustang could have foreseen. The Mustang's defiance was not just the reaction of an animal. It was the spirit of survival itself. With one desperate burst of energy, it lunged against the enclosure, testing the strength of its confines. The hired men hesitated for a moment, caught off guard by the raw power of the creature they sought to subdue. As darkness descended and the desert wind began to howl, the stage was set. What would unfold next would challenge not only the boundaries of life and death, but also the very essence of redemption and justice. Night fell swiftly over the ranch, casting long shadows across the desert landscape. The men tasked with carrying out Charles's orders stood around the Mustang's enclosure, their lanterns flickering in the cool breeze. The Mustang, though confined, remained a figure of raw power, its muscles taut and its wild eyes burning. With determination, Jake, the burliest of the group, tossed the rope over his shoulder and stepped closer. "Let's do this quickly," he muttered. "The boss doesn't like delays." The other men nodded, their movements cautious as they edged nearer to the animal. But the Mustang wasn't going down without a fight. It reared up, hooves striking the air, forcing the men to back away. One of them, a younger recruit named Eddie, hesitated. "Do we really need to do this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "It's just a horse." Jake shot him a glare. "Orders are orders. You want to explain to Whitmore why we didn't do our job?" Eddie fell silent, but the unease in his eyes was unmistakable. As they tried again to approach, the Mustang's instincts took over. It lunged toward the weakest part of the fence, its powerful body slamming against the wooden posts. The impact sent splinters flying, and the sound echoed into the night. The men froze, startled by the force of the animal's will. "Damn it, this thing's stronger than it looks," Jake cursed, tightening his grip on the rope. He motioned for the others to corner the Mustang, but before they could act, a distant sound broke through the tension. A sharp, piercing whistle. The men turned, their lanterns swinging as they scanned the darkness. From the shadows emerged a figure on horseback, cloaked in the faint glow of moonlight. The rider, an older man with a rugged face and a steady gaze, approached with an air of quiet authority. "What's going on here?" the man called out, his voice carrying easily over the desert wind. Jake straightened, his posture defensive. "None of your business, old man. Move along." The stranger didn't budge. He guided his horse closer, his eyes locking onto the Mustang in the enclosure. "That horse doesn't belong to you," he said firmly. Jake scoffed. "It belongs to Mr. Whitmore, and we're under orders to get rid of it. So unless you want trouble, I suggest you keep riding." The man's jaw tightened. "You're not laying a hand on that animal," he said, his tone low and steady. Eddie, still visibly shaken, glanced between Jake and the stranger. "Maybe we should leave it alone," he mumbled, but Jake ignored him. "You don't want to do this," the stranger warned, his hand resting near the rifle strapped to his saddle. Jake snarled, stepping toward the fence. "I'm not about to take orders from some drifter." In an instant, the stranger dismounted and raised his rifle, aiming it squarely at Jake. "You take one more step and you'll regret it," he said, his voice deadly calm. The standoff was tense, the air thick with unspoken threats. Finally, Jake raised his hands, backing away. "Fine," he growled, "but this isn't over." With a sharp whistle, the stranger opened the gate to the enclosure. The Mustang hesitated, its wild eyes studying the man before cautiously stepping forward. He reached out a hand, speaking in soothing tones, and the horse seemed to understand. It lowered its head, allowing him to guide it out of the pen. "Where are you taking it?" Eddie asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Somewhere safe," the stranger replied. "This horse deserves better than the likes of you." As the Mustang followed the stranger into the night, Jake clenched his fists. "Whitmore's not going to like this," he muttered darkly. The Mustang's journey was far from over. The stranger, whose name was Elias, led the horse deep into the desert, away from the ranch and its dangers. They traveled through rugged terrain, crossing dry riverbeds and steep canyons under the cover of darkness. Elias spoke to the Mustang as they rode, his voice calm and steady. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" he said. "But you're strong, stronger than they realize." The Mustang seemed to respond, its ears flicking toward Elias's voice. There was a bond forming between them, one built on mutual respect and understanding. As dawn broke, Elias guided the Mustang to a hidden oasis, a lush green sanctuary nestled among the barren cliffs. It was a place few knew existed, and even fewer could reach. Here the Mustang could rest and recover. For days, Elias cared for the horse, tending to its wounds and ensuring it had food and water. The Mustang, once wary and defensive, began to trust him. It would nudge his shoulder playfully or follow him as he worked around the camp, but the peace didn't last. Back at the ranch, Charles Whitmore was furious. When Jake informed him of the Mustang's escape and the stranger's interference, Charles's rage was palpable. "I want that horse found," he roared, "and I want that man dealt with." Jake, eager to redeem himself, rounded up a group of men to track Elias and the Mustang. They scoured the desert, following faint tracks and asking questions in nearby towns. It wasn't long before they picked up Elias's trail. One evening, as Elias sat by the fire, he felt the familiar tension in the air, a warning that danger was near. The Mustang, grazing nearby, lifted its head, ears swiveling toward the sound of approaching footsteps. Elias stood, his hand instinctively going to his rifle. From the shadows, Jake and his men emerged, their weapons drawn. "You've got nowhere to run, old man," Jake sneered. Elias's eyes narrowed. "You really think this is about the horse?" he said. "This is about power. Whitmore doesn't care about the Mustang. He just wants to prove he can control everything." Jake laughed coldly. "Save your speeches. Hand over the horse, or you won't make it out of here alive." The Mustang stepped closer to Elias, its powerful frame radiating strength and defiance. "If you want him," Elias said, raising his rifle, "you'll have to go through me." The men hesitated, sensing the resolve in Elias's voice. But Jake, driven by his own bruised ego, wasn't ready to back down. "So be it," he snarled, signaling his men to advance. What followed was a battle of wills, a clash between greed and integrity. As the Mustang's survival hung in the balance, Elias and the horse fought together, their bond unbreakable. The desert sky was a kaleidoscope of oranges and reds as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the rocky terrain. In the hidden oasis, Elias stood with the Mustang, his hand resting on the horse's neck. Both were tense, sensing the danger that lurked beyond the safety of the cliffs. The stillness of the evening was shattered by the sound of distant hooves, pounding against the ground, growing louder with each passing moment. "They're here," Elias muttered, his eyes narrowing as he turned toward the approaching dust cloud. From the edge of the oasis, Jake and his men emerged, their horses snorting and restless. They dismounted, rifles slung across their backs, their eyes gleaming with ruthless determination. Behind them, Charles Whitmore arrived, seated atop a magnificent black stallion, his tailored coat and hat making him look more like a general leading an army than a businessman. "End of the line, old man," Whitmore said, his voice cold and authoritative. "You've interfered long enough. That horse belongs to me." Elias stepped forward, placing himself between the Mustang and the men. "You left this animal for dead," he said firmly. "You don't own anything but your greed." Whitmore's jaw tightened, his calm facade slipping. "I warned you not to cross me," he said, dismounting his horse. "You've forced my hand." Jake and his men began to fan out, circling the oasis and cutting off any chance of escape. The Mustang shifted uneasily, its nostrils flaring as it sensed the hostility. Elias tightened his grip on the rifle, his sharp eyes scanning the group for any signs of movement. "This doesn't have to end in bloodshed," Elias said, his voice steady. "Walk away, Whitmore. Let the Mustang go. It's the right thing to do." Whitmore laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "The right thing?" he sneered. "The right thing is showing everyone what happens when they defy me. That horse is mine and I'll take it, whether you're alive to see it or not." The standoff reached its breaking point when Jake raised his rifle, taking aim at the Mustang. "Don't make me do this," he muttered, but the look in his eyes revealed his willingness to follow through. Before Jake could pull the trigger, Elias fired first, the crack of the rifle echoing through the oasis. The bullet struck the ground near Jake's feet, forcing him to stumble back. "No one's taking this horse," Elias growled, his voice like steel. The Mustang, sensing its moment, reared up, its hooves slicing through the air with a fierce cry. The men hesitated, unnerved by the raw power and defiance of the animal. Seizing the opportunity, Elias shouted, "Run, boy, go!" With a burst of speed, the Mustang bolted past the men, its muscles rippling as it leaped over a low barrier of rocks and disappeared into the shadows of the desert. Whitmore's face twisted in rage. "Stop him!" he bellowed, but his men were too slow, scrambling to mount their horses and give chase. Elias remained in place, his rifle still raised, blocking their path. "You'll have to get through me first," he said, his voice low but filled with unwavering resolve. Whitmore stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "You've made a grave mistake," he hissed. "You think this is over? I'll destroy everything you care about." Elias smirked, a glint of defiance in his weathered face. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about me, it's about that horse. You can take my life, but you'll never take his freedom." Whitmore raised his hand, signaling Jake to advance. But as Jake moved forward, a sudden sound split the air. A thunderous roar, followed by the rhythmic pounding of hooves. The Mustang had returned. Charging out of the shadows with a force that seemed almost otherworldly, the Mustang galloped straight into the circle of men, scattering them like leaves in a storm. Jake's horse reared, throwing him to the ground as the Mustang barreled past. One by one, the men abandoned their positions, retreating in the face of the animal's untamed fury. Whitmore stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief, as the Mustang skidded to a halt in front of Elias. The horse pawed the ground, its dark eyes fixed on Whitmore as if daring him to act. Elias placed a hand on the Mustang's neck, his voice calm but firm. "You've lost, Whitmore. Leave now while you still have your pride." For a moment, Whitmore seemed to consider his options, his fists clenching at his sides. But the sight of his men defeated, and the Mustang standing tall and proud, finally broke him. Without a word, he turned and mounted his horse, spurring it into a gallop as he disappeared into the night. Jake and the others followed, their shoulders slumped in defeat. The oasis grew quiet once more. The only sounds the soft rustle of the wind and the Mustang's steady breathing. Elias turned to the horse, a smile breaking across his face. "You did it, boy," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You showed them what real strength looks like." The Mustang nudged Elias's shoulder, its wild spirit still intact, but its bond with the man stronger than ever. Together they stood beneath the stars, knowing they had faced the ultimate challenge and won. This was more than a victory. It was a testament to the power of resilience, the unbreakable bond between man and animal, and the enduring spirit of freedom. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the desert sky in hues of amber and gold. The oasis, once a battleground, was now quiet and serene, as if nature itself had acknowledged the victory of courage over cruelty. Elias sat on a weathered rock near the clear water, his rifle resting beside him. The Mustang stood nearby, its chestnut coat glistening in the soft morning light, the scars of its ordeal a testament to its resilience. Elias reached out, running a hand along the horse's neck. "You've earned your freedom, boy," he murmured, his voice filled with both pride and a trace of sadness. "It's time for you to go where you belong." The Mustang seemed to understand. It gazed at Elias with its dark, intelligent eyes, the unspoken bond between them as strong as ever. But the wildness in the horse's spirit, the same untamed energy that had driven it to survive against all odds, was calling it back to the open desert. For a moment, Elias hesitated. Over the past few days, the Mustang had become more than just an animal he had saved. It had become a companion, a symbol of hope, and a reminder of his own ability to stand against the odds. But Elias knew deep down that the Mustang's place wasn't by his side. It was in the wild where it could run free, unburdened by the chains of human greed. "You don't need me anymore," Elias said, stepping back. He unclipped the makeshift halter from the Mustang's neck, letting it fall to the ground. "Go on. The world's waiting for you." The Mustang pawed the ground, its ears flicking back and forth as it looked toward the horizon. Slowly it began to move, taking tentative steps away from Elias. But then it paused, turning its head to glance back at the man who had risked everything to save it. Elias smiled, tipping his hat. "Go," he said softly. "Live your life the way you were meant to." With a powerful leap, the Mustang took off, its hooves pounding against the earth as it raced toward the open desert. Elias watched as it grew smaller and smaller, eventually disappearing into the vast expanse of sand and sky. Back at the Whitmore estate, the atmosphere was tense. Charles Whitmore sat in his grand study, staring out the window at the empty enclosure. Where the Mustang had once been, his face was etched with anger and frustration. He had lost, not just the horse, but the battle to assert his control. Jake stood awkwardly near the door, nursing the bruises and scrapes he had earned during the failed mission. "What do you want us to do now, boss?" he asked hesitantly. Whitmore didn't answer immediately. Instead, he swirled the glass of whiskey in his hand, his mind racing with thoughts of revenge. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was the memory of the Mustang's defiance, or the realization that Elias and the horse had exposed the emptiness of his power. "Leave it," Whitmore finally said, his voice hollow. "It's over." Jake blinked in surprise, but nodded, grateful to avoid further conflict. As he left the room, Whitmore remained seated, staring out at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set. Weeks passed, and life at the oasis returned to its natural rhythm. Elias continued his solitary existence, tending to his small garden and ensuring the sanctuary remained hidden from the outside world. But he often found himself glancing toward the distant hills, wondering where the Mustang had gone and how it was faring. One morning, as Elias worked by the stream, he heard the sound of hooves. His heart leapt, and he turned to see a familiar figure standing at the edge of the clearing. It was the Mustang, its coat shining in the sunlight, its stance proud and strong. Elias chuckled, shaking his head. "Couldn't stay away, huh?" The Mustang trotted closer, nudging Elias's shoulder affectionately. It was as if the horse had come back to thank him, to show that the bond they had forged would never truly be broken. "You're always welcome here," Elias said, his voice soft. "But this place is just a stop on your journey. The world is yours now." The Mustang stayed for a few hours, grazing peacefully and resting in the shade. When it was time to leave, it turned to Elias one last time, letting out a soft whinny, before galloping away, its powerful strides carrying it back to the wild. The story of the Mustang and the man spread quietly among those who lived near the desert. Some spoke of Elias as a hero who had stood up to the powerful Charles Whitmore, while others marveled at the tale of the Mustang's unbreakable spirit. But for Elias, the greatest reward was knowing he had done the right thing, not for recognition, but for the sake of a life that deserved to be free. As the days turned into months, Elias continued to watch the horizon, always ready to catch a glimpse of the Mustang running free. And though the horse was no longer by his side, its spirit lived on in the oasis, a reminder of the power of resilience, compassion, and the unyielding desire for freedom. Sometimes, late at night, Elias would sit by the fire and think back to the moment he first saw the Mustang. It had been a creature of wild beauty then, and it remained so now. But it had also become a symbol, a testament to the idea that even in the face of cruelty and greed, hope and determination could prevail. The Mustang story wasn't just about survival. It was about reclaiming what was lost and proving that No chain, no matter how strong, could bind the spirit of the wild. Elias smiled to himself, the firelight dancing in his eyes. Somewhere out there, the Mustang was galloping through the open desert, its mane flying like a banner of freedom. And for Elias, that knowledge was enough. If this story moved you, let it inspire you to take action. The tale of the Mustang is more than just a journey of survival. It's a powerful reminder that resilience, compassion, and courage can overcome even the greatest odds. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, can create a ripple effect that changes lives, just as Elias's decision to stand up for the Mustang sparked a chain of events no one could have foreseen. In a world that often overlooks the vulnerable, it's up to each of us to stand firm, protect what's right, and fight for freedom. Whether it's for ourselves, others, or the creatures who share this planet with us. If you were inspired by the strength and spirit of this incredible horse, help spread this message. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that hope and determination can defy even the darkest odds. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss more stories that celebrate resilience, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. Together, we can create a world where every life, no matter how small or wild, is treated with the dignity and respect it deserves. Because, just like the Mustang, we all have the power to rise above and run free.